Thank you, colleagues, for raising what I know is a really important matter and which is important to all of us here. But also thank you for giving me the opportunity to outline how I do believe we are actually making progress when it comes to building stronger, safer communities. As Minister, I'm determined to keep people safe. That has always been front and centre of everything that I do, and to assure you I'm not distracted in any way from that task. But there are challenges, and there always will be challenges. I've no doubt of that. There's always more that we can do as well. Our communities want more Gardaí, as do I. I think we all agree with that. We want the same thing. But investment in Garda Síochána across the justice sector is increasing. It's the highest it's ever been. Budget 2023 brought Garda Síochána's total allocation to 2.14 billion, an increase of 340 million in annual funding just in the last 3 years alone. This is supporting Garda Síochána in the excellent work it is doing in many areas. So firstly, gangland crime, where we have seen massive changes and massive work being done on the ground. Ongoing success in seizing drugs being smuggled into our country, and we know last week we had the largest ever seizure led by Garda Síochána. We're building international coalitions to tackle these organised crime gangs who operate with little respect for borders, as little respect as they have for people. Gangland murders are falling dramatically, but what this means, unfortunately, is where we see homicides, and yes, we've seen an increase, these killings largely are now driven by domestic abuse, which is a matter that we have to address and that we are addressing. And I believe we're making progress in tackling this heinous epidemic through our zero tolerance plan. We've introduced tougher laws, stronger sentences. We're developing new refuge and accommodation. We're building long-term structures to tackle domestic, sexual and gender-based violence, most importantly to challenge and to change the attitudes which underpin it and to help victims. We've just advertised for the position of the CEO for a new domestic violence agency, and that will be up and running early in the new year. This is to make sure that we have structures in place so that no matter who the minister, no matter who is in government, no matter which of us are serving in the Oireachtas, that this will be long-term reform to tackle what is a very deep-rooted problem within our society. I think nobody knows better than the local community what needs to be done to improve community safety, whether it's Navan, whether it's Galway, whether it's any of the towns or villages that we represent. Community safety partnerships are the way in which we will respond to that. They acknowledge that increasing community safety is not just the responsibility of Garda Síochána, and I think we all acknowledge that too much has fallen on their shoulders for many, many years now. It requires many state agencies, organisations, elected representatives to come together. So whether it's TUSLA, whether it's local businesses, education providers, enterprise workers, youth services, working together and working with local community and elected representatives, bringing everyone around the table, identifying what the issues are within each county, within each community, and drawing up individual plans. From next year, every area will have a community safety partnership to draw up their own community safety plan. But ahead of the national rollout, what we've done is roll out 3 pilot areas. We have the North Inner City, Longford and Waterford, making sure that we have geographical and regional spread, looking at various different size of counties as well. When we commenced and when I commenced the community safety partnership pilots, the goal was very simple. We want to empower communities to have a say in community safety. The Dublin North Inner City Plan, which was published just this month, I think is a perfect example of this fresh approach. If you look at some of the actions that they published in this, and they're already been worked on and have already been funded in certain ways. There's recommendations around Garda presence, enhanced youth services, businesses taking initiatives such as the new community safety wardens, local authorities playing its part too, simple things like street lighting, cleaning, shop fronts, all of these issues being addressed as part of one plan being rolled out collectively. It won't be perfect, but again, this is a long-term plan trying to deal with often deep-rooted problems. Along with Minister of State James Brown, I'm absolutely committed to further extending our network of youth diversion programmes. And I think this is hugely important when we talk about dealing with antisocial behaviour and issues that are happening across the country. These programmes are hugely valuable work. They work under the Youth Justice Strategy, and funding for this alone has increased by 67% just in the last 3 years. So there's 30 million supporting these projects, which means by the end of this year, every single part of the country will have cover. But what we're now trying to do is make sure that there's weekend cover, but also that we start dealing with the hard to reach, or supporting the hard to reach children, and even younger children than we're dealing with now. Unfortunately, that is a fact that we need to be engaging and creating diversion programmes for much younger people. This autumn, in fact today, I'll be in the Seanad progressing the Policing Security and Community Safety Bill. This legislation is what underpins the partnerships nationally, but a visible presence, I think, really is of course central to community safety as well. As I said at the outset, I want more Gardaí. We all want more Gardaí. It is a fact, though, unfortunately, that we had to close the Garda College when COVID was here. It is a fact. People might like to ignore it. People might like to say the last 3 years numbers have dropped, but the college was closed, and with no college we cannot produce Garda recruits. My party was proud to reopen it previously when it had closed, and we are now getting into a building momentum in recruitment. Almost 500 people completed or began training last year. After the COVID forced pause, members in Templemore continue to increase. So we have attestations every 3 months, 135 being the intake in February, 154 in May, 170 for just last July, and we will now have another college number starting again in October. So when we look at the overall number this year, we'll have 100 new Gardaí attested, 470 will be in active training, and then 2 more classes are due into Templemore in October and December. So numbers are stabilising. We knew they would drop. We knew they would drop lower than we would like, but they're stabilising, and I have every confidence that they will start to increase as well. And as deputies have alluded to, plans are in train to allow for a new recruitment campaign for the Garda Reserve, which in turn will help increase visibility and will support Gardaí in the work that they're doing on the ground. We're examining all options, and I want to assure you of that. In terms of recruitment and retention, that means increasing the entry age at which members can join, and I hope to be able to make with the Garda Commissioner a decision on that very shortly. We're engaging in terms of the retirement age, but we're also looking at other measures as well, and obviously we have budget discussions that are ongoing at the moment, and that will be made clear next week. In terms of the structure itself, and you've alluded to the fact that there's a lot of reform happening at the moment, there have been a huge amount of changes, and I'm first to acknowledge that a lot of changes have come in a very short space of time, and that's not easy, and that in itself puts pressure on members. And I do want to thank members of Garda Síochána for the way in which they have responded and that they are implementing this reform. But they also give feedback, and I have to stress that there is a continuous engagement from senior management with members to understand how these changes can be adapted, can be amended, how they can work better, whether it's the operating model, whether it's the new online systems. Changes have taken place, but I appreciate more might be needed, and I have no doubt that where that is required, that changes will continue to take place. In terms of the operating model, I think one of the main benefits of this new model is that it will put in place community policing teams right across the country, and I think we all agree every person wants to know who their local community guard is, that they can pick up the phone, that they have their number, that they're able to deal with them, whether it's antisocial behaviour, whether it's in relation to crime prevention, community safety, or whatever matter. People have different reasons for wanting to contact a guard. So each community Garda will have responsibility to be highly visible, to be active, to engage with local businesses, with local communities, to deal with local groups as well, and they will be at the front line of a reformed service which has community policing at its core. But I would say on this, because I know there's a lot of feedback saying this isn't working, this new structure isn't working, reform and change takes time, particularly where you have a global pandemic in the middle of it, where that in turn affects numbers. And many of the Gardaí that I speak to, when you talk to them individually and you ask, well, if we had more Gardaí, if we had the numbers that we thought we would have prior to COVID, would the model work better? And many of them say yes. So we need to make sure that we continue to listen, to adapt and change where change needs to happen, but that we continue to recruit as quickly as we can. And there are many people who are very much want to join on Garda Síochána, despite perhaps the view that that's not the case. It is absolutely the case that there are thousands still applying for the recruitment campaigns, and we will hold another recruitment campaign early in the new year. In terms of the welfare of Gardaí, because members have mentioned this as well, it's something that I take very seriously, and every meeting that I have with any of the representative organisations, this is something that they raise and that I speak to them about. What more can I do? What funding can I provide to make sure that the supports and the resources are there for them? Because you're right, Deputy Baird, they deal with horrific situations and have to respond to very difficult scenarios. So it's important that we put the measures in place to support them. That's why we enacted legislation before the summer to increase the maximum sentence for somebody who has assaulted a member from Garda Síochána. That's why we're bringing in body-worn cameras, and I'm pleased that that legislation is passing through the Seanad at the moment to make sure that they are provided and afforded with the same protections when they go about their work. That bill will also allow for further community CCTV, which assists them in doing their work. But on top of that as well, it's making sure that we have funding for the likes of the COPS resource, which is an online app which is supporting them directly, their health, their well-being, their wellness and access to supports, that we support wellness days and that we do even more, and that's an absolute priority for me at all times. In relation to the roster, just very briefly if I could, I absolutely appreciate that this is important for members, for their work-life balance, for the same reason that our work is important to us and the way in which we balance that with our family lives and our social lives. But it's also important that the Commissioner is able to put in place a roster that fits the needs of the people of the day. This will only be resolved by people talking, by sitting down around the table. I know I'm saying that consistently, but that is how this type of scenario gets resolved. There are further meetings happening today and tomorrow between the Garda Commission and the 4 associations, and I have no doubt that there will be a solution and a resolution found to what is a really important issue for absolutely everybody involved here. So I thank you for putting down this motion. It's really important that we continue to invest in Garda Síochána, that we continue to support them, because they have an extremely difficult job, and I think we all want to support them in whatever way that we can.
Minister, are you moving an amendment?